Okay, grade 9. Here we are with our lesson number 8 of 10 lessons in our unit on ecosystems and ecology, and we're talking about the impacts that humans have on trophic levels. This lesson will not be on your quiz next week, okay, but you still need to take notes obviously today. And then we'll have other previous lessons ending at lesson number 7, so it will be on the quiz next week. So, content target. I can describe and analyze human impacts on ecosystems such as eutrophication, hunting, habitat fragmentation, and bioaccumulation. And our language target, I can use prefixes and suffixes to break down large vocabulary words such as bioaccumulation. So there's our 2 goals for today, one for ecology and one for language use. We are on to our 4th and last big idea. So our last big idea is how do human activities impact ecosystems? We have this today and next lesson, and our final simulation activity next week will be about this as well. So take a minute and write down our last big idea for this unit. Okay, so our first template for today is going to be 2-pager. You have 1 page for eutrophication, 1 page for bioaccumulation, and each one you have a space in the center to draw a diagram, and cause and effect, cause on the left, effect on the right, and process at the bottom, cause, effect, process. So for each one, you're going to draw the diagram and say what causes eutrophication, what effects eutrophication has, and what steps cause this thing to happen. Same with the bioaccumulation, what is the cause of it, what's the effect of it, and what is the process of it, and a drawing in the center. So pause the video, take a minute, and draw your template, please. Okay, we're going to start with eutrophication. This is the diagram you need to draw. The steps here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those are what you can write in the process part. You can summarize them in the process part of your diagram. So we're going to go through this process together here. So since both nitrogen and phosphorus, we taught them last class, those 2 cycles are both limiting factors in ecosystems. They limit plant growth. Humans have found a way to fix that issue. How do humans fix the issue of a lack or insufficient nitrogen and phosphorus? Well, we have invented chemical fertilizers. Morocco is known for its phosphorus, and a lot of phosphorus gets used to produce fertilizers for agriculture. Now the problem is that all these different fertilizers we use on land like agricultural land, so farms, lawns, golf courses, it doesn't just stay where we put it. If it stayed where we put it, if it stayed on the grass, it stayed on the farmer's field, then it wouldn't be a big problem. But when it rains or the land is irrigated, you spray a lot of water onto the land to, like, you're sprinkling your lawn, you're irrigating the fields, then those nutrients, those nitrogen and phosphorus, they enter the aquatic ecosystem in what's called the runoff. So with the water cycle, when the water is moving off the land into the body of water, like rain falls in a mountain, it carries water down the mountain to a river. That can also carry things like fertilizer in it, which is full of nitrogen and phosphorus. So we have extra nitrogen and phosphorus that isn't meant to be in an aquatic ecosystem. This causes a chain reaction that leads to ecosystem death. So here's our cause, here's our effect, and here's the process. Okay? So the process is we have excess nutrients from fertilizer being flushed into from the land into rivers or lakes by rainwater. So that's the runoff. Runoff is taking nutrients from fertilizers into the water. Then next step is going to happen is plants are going to flourish. Those nitrogen and phosphorus molecules are going to cause the fertilizer will help aquatic plants grow a lot. We have duckweed, we have algae, other plants are going to grow a lot, which seems like a good thing. But everything in an ecosystem has to be in balance and equilibrium, and this upsets the equilibrium in these aquatic ecosystems. The third step where things start to go wrong. Algae starts to bloom. There's a huge number of algae are growing at the same time. The population goes really, really high really quickly, and that means that there's less oxygen because the algae are blocking the sunlight from entering the water, which means all these plants in the bottom and the algae lower water, they cannot do photosynthesis. And part of the process of photosynthesis is that plants will then release oxygen into the water. So when plants use sunlight to make sugar, make chemical energy, part of that process is they release oxygen. And since there's no sunlight coming in anymore, these plants can't do photosynthesis, and therefore there is no oxygen being added to the water. So we have really low oxygen, and then plants are going to die because they can't photosynthesize to get energy, and then we'll have less oxygen in the water. Step 4, all these dead things, dead plants, they're going to start being decomposed. The decomposers in this ecosystem are going to start to break it down. So by bacteria specifically are the decomposers in this case, and that's going to require oxygen, so it uses up oxygen even more. There's less oxygen being produced since so many plants are dying, and there's more oxygen being used because decomposers are decomposing the plants that are dying. Not a good cycle. And what happens eventually, if this doesn't get fixed quickly enough, this leads to ecosystem death. Oxygen levels get so low where fish can't live in the water. Fish breathe in dissolved oxygen in the water. They can't breathe. Other organisms die. The entire thing just dies. So I'll just pause the video for a second, give you a chance to write down the information. So this is the cause, this is the effect, and this is the process. You can say this is an effect as well. So pause the video and do your diagram and write down your notes. Okay, next we're going to look at 4 other impacts. We'll come back to bioaccumulation after, but I wanted these to be on a double-sided page. So other human impacts on ecosystems, 2-page template. We'll talk about dams, hunting, urbanization, and habitat fragmentation. So again, pause the video, draw your template. Okay, so let's talk about dams. So what is the purpose of building a dam? Why do humans build dams? Some of the most amazing feats of engineering on this planet are dams built by humans. There's a couple of reasons why they do it. One is to make this what's called the reservoir, this large, deep area of water at the top. It can be useful for irrigation, for watering fields and farming. It can be useful for water storage if you're concerned about drought. It can also be useful to create electricity, hydroelectric electricity this way. Recreational fishing, and that kind of can happen here. All of these things, these green things here, are all good things that can come of this. Okay, drinking water can be held there as well. Downstream would be from flooding with the seasons because you have this dam to regulate the flow of water. Lots of reasons why we do dams. But originally this dam was not this deep, right? It was not as deep of a river. And when we flood a body of water and then build a reservoir and block a river, how could that possibly affect the river ecosystems, all the things that live there? So can fish swim through the dam up and down the river? The river has changed in depth, its abiotic factors have changed, the temperature has changed, the light penetration has changed, the wave movement has changed, all of these things have changed, and that's going to cause issues. So examples of impacts from dams: habitat disruption. The river is no longer continuous, we've broken it up. Fish migration paths. So some fish will migrate through uprivers to a certain spot, like salmon are famous for doing it, and they migrate the river and then lay their eggs and spawn. And if they can't do that, because a dam's in the way, that's going to cause a huge impact on the entire ecosystem. Because of course salmon are a big part of the food web. What's called thermal pollution, it's the fact that the water up here is going to be a lot colder than the water down here. So the change in temperature is caused by creating a dam. The fact that it's not the same temperature everywhere can affect the species. That's an abiotic factor for their environment that's no longer being managed. Now, there are some solutions that humans have developed to help make dams more sustainable. So examples include what is called a fish ladder. So in a fish ladder, it can look like this in real life, and here's a diagram of one. It's a path for fish to swim up through the dam. So they have a pathway they can safely swim through. So they kind of swim along the side and then cut through this way, and it gives them these little resting points in between where there is no current. So they can swim up the dam, and then they go in here, they get too tired, and they rest, and they swim past the current this way, and keep going all the way up until they pass through and into the rest of the body of water. So this fixes the migration issue. Another way to do this is going to have even bigger solution is if we want to make hydropower, we can use what's called the run-of-river technique. So a run-of-river dam or hydroelectric dam, okay, run-of-river is where we use gravity to help us. And we take the intake of water here, and instead of blocking the river with a dam and causing thermal pollution, habitat disruption, and all these issues, instead what we're going to do in flooding the land, we just take in some water and allow gravity to pull it down and use the potential energy from gravity to turn a turbine down here and make electricity. But we're leaving the river intact. We're just pulling some water out here, moving it down here. It's going to have much, much less impact than a regular traditional dam. Okay, so fish ladders and run-of-river dams can both be ways to help reduce the impact of dams. Okay, the next one is hunting. I want you to do a sketch of this graph. Don't worry about like perfectly spacing the dates and everything. We have millions of deer here, and we're starting in 1450 going up till 2000, where the numbers are highest of the shoal deer population. The dark brown is a total. Higher, going down in 1900, then spiking back up again and going down again. Okay, so draw that, please. What is hunting? Now, hunting is where we have humans. They're going to go out into the wild and we're going to kill an organism for our own use. Okay, so this is where we're going to go out and kill the organism for our own use. It could be for eating, it could be for trophy hunting, could be for a variety of reasons. By the time we're humans, go out and kill an organism for our own purposes, that is hunting. How is this different from other predator-prey interactions like a wolf killing a deer? Why is a human killing a deer different? Well, one of the big things is that humans use technology to help us kill deer. So we're definitely not going out there with our bare hands trying to kill a deer. We also don't need to eat the deer to survive. Right? I think that's an important difference as well here. Things to think about for hunting. Trophy hunting. Trophy hunting is where we go out, humans go out to kill something just because they want to put it on their wall or they want to take a picture with it. So a deer, a buck that has a really big set of antlers is going to be more exciting for people to get. And then they would kill it, cut off its head, stuff it, put it on the wall. People would have killed elephants for trophy hunting, rhinos, lions, which is, I think, horrible to kill endangered species just to feel like you, I don't know, people who want to do it because they want to feel strong, want to feel like they are the top predator, that kind of thing. So trophy hunting is not for food, it's just for a prize. Traditional hunting practices, a lot of indigenous peoples around the world hunt as part of how they've come to nourish their families themselves, how they get their food supply. The Inuit in Canada, they do it for seals. Different traditional indigenous peoples do it all over the world for different kinds of species, depending where they're from. And oftentimes they have lots of rules about how they do it, picking only species of a certain age or a certain sex, certain times of year only. And there tend to be very simple practices where they're harvesting the prey, but in a low enough number that it won't affect the population in the long run. Hunting licenses and regulations. So if we look what happened here in the graph, the deer are being hunted. As the human population increased, they hunted the deer to really low numbers, right? Less than 5 million deer left in the entire United States. And what happened in 1900 is they started doing hunting licenses. and setting rules that deer season for hunting is only so many weeks. It's not all year round. And you can only take male deer of a certain age or female deer of a certain age. You can't take babies, that kind of stuff, to try and allow the population to maintain. So we can't take too many deer. The population can't maintain itself any longer. Okay, that was hunting. Next is urbanization. So urbanization is talking about development of cities. So people have only been living in the history of humans. Cities have not been that common. So only for the past 10,000 years have humans been living in cities. But there are some major benefits to living in cities. Talk to your partner. What kind of benefits might those be? So we can talk about things like shared resources. We can talk about things like a sense of community and supporting each other. We can talk about having less distance to go to get things you need. Sharing your time, so if one person bakes all the bread for the day, then someone else has time to make better tools, that kind of stuff. So we're working together, the collaboration piece. Now, suburbs, that's a relatively new thing. That's something kind of a compromise between living in the city and in the country. It was really, really popular in the 1950s, and suburbs have their own benefits. So suburbs looks kind of like this. It's a big neighborhood. Outside the city center, people have lawns and houses, but they're relatively close to the city. So a big benefit here, and how they kind of sold it to people, is that you're going to have a lawn. You're not living in a little apartment in the city. You have your own lawn. You have your own freestanding house. It's more affordable because it's outside the city, and you live, but you still live close to the city that you can drive in easily enough. Lots of stores you have access to, all that kind of thing. Now, these do bring ecological impacts. So if we have more houses, we have more people, we're going to take up more habitat. So forests will be encroached upon by humans, maybe cut down. We're going to have more waste, more noise, all those kinds of things from more people living closer and closer to the natural environment. So I want you to think about the difference, compare and contrast the partner living a truly rural life, like on a small farm, growing your own food, versus living in a suburb where you're not really urban in the city, you're not really rural in the country. You're kind of in between. So here's a suburb 1990, same one 2005, same one 2015, where you can see getting more and more homes. So on a whiteboard with a partner, make a compare and contrast list. Rural life on a small farm versus living in a suburb. Pause the video and go for it. Okay, so hopefully you have your list now. So things in a small farm are going to be the fact that you're growing what you need locally. It's a small farm, so you're probably growing a variety of produce and raising different kinds of animals you need for their products to use for living. And then living in a suburb, you have this big, both of them are going to have this kind of green space, to various sizes of freestanding house, some sort of lawn or fields around. But in a suburb, you don't have farm and those kind of things easily accessible. You have to go drive quite a bit to get to those kind of things. So we're increasing our pollution and destroying more habitat to have these suburbs areas. So urbanization destroys habitat, and it causes issues with increasing pollution and having to go further to get food. We're not really growing our own things ourselves like we would in a farm, but we're also not in the city where everything is so close to each other. We have more space, so we're taking up more space, using more resources. Okay, so habitat fragmentation, to draw something like this where you have a piece of habitat that's intact, surrounded by empty area, or you can draw like this, is called a corridor, connecting two habitat fragments with a corridor or like a land bridge. Either one, you can just draw a sketch of what it looks like for your notes. So why could an organism's habitat be destroyed? What might happen to destroy a habitat? Well, a great example is deforestation, where they're cutting down trees to use the land for agriculture. And this happens a lot now in South America, where they're cutting down huge parts of the Amazon rainforest, to plant palm oil trees to grow palm oil, which is why you might hear some people who are environmentalists saying not to eat or buy products that contain palm oil because it's having a huge impact on the Amazon rainforest. Maybe we're building a suburb. We need to have more land to build bigger homes. Maybe we're changing the land use, building a highway that's cutting through forest to access things. There's a lot of highways in Canada that go through big bits of forest because it's such a huge country. And then when we destroy some parts of a habitat, but leave others intact, this creates what are called smaller fragments, these smaller chunks of habitat. And this is going to decrease what's called the interior habitat and increase the edge habitat. So the interior is just the middle part here, which has different abiotic factors than the edge around the outside. So what we're doing is we're creating these little bits of fragments that are going to have more edge and less interior. Some ways we can work on this. We can do things like wildlife bridges like this, so that wildlife that are really big and roam long distances, like predators like wolves, they can cross between habitats. And we have lots of interesting video footage of wolves and other organisms using these kinds of bridges to connect things. And they usually use them at nighttime when there's less, they feel safer to do so. Would a bridge like this over a highway, would that work for this situation, this deforestation situation? So you could leave a little chunk here, add a chunk of trees that's left intact to connect these different fragments. And then you have corridors between them. But the problem with that is that it's still going to have a lot of edge effect. And it would leave like a safer pathway for some organisms to move between habitat fragments. But it's definitely not ideal compared to having your habitat intact. Okay, now we're going to go back to our first template and bioaccumulation here. So again, drawing here, cause, effect, and process. So bioaccumulation, you can draw something like this here. Again, sketch it out. It's okay if it's not perfect. Don't put pressure yourselves to make it gorgeous. This is directly into food chains and energy transfers. So a pollutant could be a variety of pollutant types. It could be DDT, PCBs, mercury. Somehow it enters the ecosystem through human activities usually, and then it makes its way up the food chain. So accumulation comes the idea that organisms passing it on one to the next, they're only getting 10% of the energy that their prey ingested, but they're getting 100% of the pollutants it has in its body. So bioaccumulation, bio, remember that prefix means life. Okay, so bio is life, and accumulation is the same word, to accumulate, to increase in quantity. So this is a really big problem. So using this logic of 10% energy being transferred only, but 100% pollutants being transferred, which organisms in the food chain are going to have the highest concentration of pollutants? Well, the higher up you go, the worse it's going to be. So if we have the top trophic levels, the fourth, fifth trophic level are going to have the worst. Look at this diagram here. Our phytoplankton, our producers, that's a trophic level 1. They're going to have a little bit of PCBs. So PCBs, that's the pollutant in this example. They get some, the producers. And then the zooplankton eat the phytoplankton. They're our second trophic level. So they have a little more inside them. And then a herring eats them, our third trophic level. It has more. And then a salmon eats the herring. That's the fourth trophic level. And then a large whale, like an orca or a seal, could even eat the salmon, and that's a fifth trophic level. And look at the concentration of PCB inside the orca. It's getting really low, higher, 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 really high as we go. Because this orca has to eat a lot of salmon to get enough energy, and the salmon has to eat a lot of herring to get a lot of energy. And that whole 10% only energy transfer, which are from energy pyramids and food webs, is part of the reason why bioaccumulation becomes such a huge problem. So our cause is we're releasing some sort of pollutant into the ecosystem, and it moves through the food chain. The effect is we have highly polluted organisms that can then die from being killed by these poisons in their body. And the process is what you see here, where we have pollutants like PCB entering the food chain at the producer level and being passed along, where more organisms are eating more and more of their prey. As that, we will have a food chain to get the energy they need to live, and they're taking in more and more pollutants. So the effect is high trophic levels have high concentrations of pollutants in their bodies. Okay, so that's our lesson for today. What you're going to do now is you're going to analyze some data about bioaccumulation. So this is posted on Schoology, DDT in the food chain. You have some explanation of bioaccumulation again, and because the pollutant is DDT, you have a picture here of the food web we're talking about, so you're in the sheet, and you have some actual data here. From the years 1968 to 1984, the amount of DDT in eggs of seabirds, Bay of Fundy versus Atlantic Ocean. So analyzing data and looking for patterns is a skill we need to work on based on how it first went the first try with the garden assignment, and we're doing zero muscles now, and this one we need more practice. So here's a chance to practice data analysis, a big skill in science. So with a partner for this, you're going to write a CER with using this data and this food web as your evidence. Okay? So you need to have a claim, look at the evidence quite thoroughly, draft a claim with your partner, and finalize it, and write down for me on a scrap paper your names, what your claim is, and say what part of these or both of these is your evidence, and then write your reasoning. Okay? Write a scrap paper, and I want you to hand it in with your names on it for formative feedback. This is your task for the rest of class time today. It's posted on Schoology. Your homework after this lesson is just to study for the quiz. The quiz is next class, so study for the quiz on Tuesday. Okay, the rest of the class time, work on this. This is not being graded for summative. It's a formative assessment. It's just more practice with data analysis, which we need definitely with this particular class. Okay, very important skill for science. If you want to see what it looks like, here it is here, the document. So we have an explanation here of the numbers. You have the food web. You have a story about DDT and how it works and the problems of it that can help you understand, and then you have the actual data. So the data and the food web can be evidence for your CER. And the DDT story will just help you better understand how bioaccumulation works. All right, guys, the end of the lesson for today. Hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email, and I'll see you next week.